Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. Usually we look at trends that are emerging or technology that's just over the horizon.
Looking forward.
Exactly. But today we're looking into the rearview mirror. Specifically, we're looking back just 1 year to a week in economic history, that is.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, it's still smoking.
It is hard to believe it's only been a year. It feels like a decade's worth of panic crammed into, 5 or 6 days. It was just unbelievable.
We're talking, of course, about the Great Trade War of 2025, and we have a stack of sources here, articles, timelines, economic autopsies, all centered around the events of last April.
A mountain of data.
We're going to talk about tariffs, we're going to talk about global markets crashing, and I promise I am not making this up. We are going to talk about taxing penguins.
The penguin incident, we definitely have to get to that. It's funny in a dark way, but it's also the perfect metaphor for the absolute chaos of that week.
It really is. But before we get to the penguins, I want to start with the why. Because the mission for this deep dive isn't just to recount the disaster, it's to understand the mechanics of it. How did one political decision, made essentially unilaterally by President Trump, bring the entire global economy to the absolute edge of a recession in less than a week?
That is the trillion-dollar question. And to answer it, we have to look at the context, the world before the announcement.
Right. So take us back. Set the scene for us. It's late March 2025. What was the vibe? What were people talking about?
Well, that's the important part that I think people forget. It was calm.
Yeah.
Genuinely calm. If you look at the economic indicators from March 2025, the world was actually taking a deep breath.
A sigh of relief, almost.
Yes. Inflation in the G7 countries was finally back under 2%. The tech sector, especially AI, was rallying hard after a tough couple of years. Shipping rates were normalizing. Economists were, all over the news talking about the soft landing.
The soft landing we'd been promised for years.
And we had basically stuck it. It looked like we did it. The engine was humming. We weren't in a boom, maybe, but we definitely weren't in a bust. It was stable, predictable.
And markets love predictable.
People live on it. And that is what made April 2nd such a shock. It didn't just throw a wrench in the gears. It threw a stick of dynamite into the engine block.
So April 2nd, Liberation Day.
That's what he called it.
Yeah.
President Trump stood up and announced a massive sweeping set of tariffs on over 90 countries. And the rhetoric was distinct. It was a complete break from anything we'd heard before from a U.S. president.
I have the transcript right here. He said, many countries, they rip us off left and right. That was the setup. And then this line, which I think will be in history books, now it's our turn to do the ripping.
Now it's our turn to do the ripping. It signals a complete shift in how the U.S. viewed the world. For decades, the entire global system was built on the idea that trade is a positive-sum game.
Meaning everyone can win.
Exactly. I buy your apples, you buy my oranges, we both get fruit we didn't have before, we're both richer. This new rhetoric framed trade as a zero-sum game, a fight. If you're winning, I must be losing. If your country has a trade surplus, that means my country has a deficit, and therefore I am being robbed.
And to fix this robbery, he didn't go to Congress. He didn't, pass a law or have a debate.
No, and this is a crucial constitutional point. He designated the trade deficits as a national emergency.
A national emergency. Like a hurricane or a pandemic or an invasion.
Legally, yes. By labeling a trade deficit, which, mind you, is just an accounting term for buying more stuff from a country than you sell to it, by labeling that an emergency, it allowed the administration to bypass all standard legislative procedures.
It just cut Congress out of the loop completely.
Entirely. It allowed him to use emergency powers to enact massive economic policy overnight. Literally, overnight.
Which explains the panic. Markets can handle bad news. They can price it in. They can handle a new tax if they know it's coming in 6 months and they can prepare. But they cannot handle waking up and finding out the fundamental rules of the game have changed while they were sleeping.
Precisely. Markets hate uncertainty. And this was uncertainty on steroids. The sources describe the reaction as immediate. Within minutes. We saw share markets from Hong Kong to Japan, then rolling into Germany, the UK, and finally the US just nosedive.
Black Monday. That was April 7th, right? The day everything bottomed out.
That was the peak of the crash. Trillions of dollars in paper value just evaporated, gone. It was a synchronized global crash because when you disrupt the flow of goods in a world this interconnected, you aren't just hurting one sector, you're severing the tendons of the entire global body.
Okay, I want to pause here because we keep using this word tariff, And I think for a lot of people, myself included sometimes, it's just this abstract word that means things get more expensive.
Sure.
But we need to understand the mechanism. If we're going to understand why the world economy almost ended, we need an explain to learn. Like, I'm 5 on tariffs.
I love an ELI 5. Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm a consumer in the US. I want to buy, let's say, an iPhone. And let's say, for this example, that iPhone is assembled in India.
Okay.
President Trump announces a 25% tariff on goods from India. What actually happens when that phone crosses the border? Does the Indian government write a check to the U.S. Treasury for 25% of the phone's value?
That is the biggest misconception in all of trade policies. No, the Indian government pays nothing. The factory in India that made the phone, they pay nothing to the U.S. government.
So who pays?
The importer pays. In this case, that would be Apple USA. The company bringing the good into the United States is the one who has to pay the tax to U.S. customs at the border.
So Apple USA has to pay an extra 25% just to get their own product into their own country.
Correct. And Apple's a business, a very profitable one, but still a business. They aren't going to just absorb that cost if they can help it. So what do?
They raise the price.
They raise the price on the shelf. The $1,000 phone is now a $1,250 phone.
So I pay it. The American consumer pays the tariff.
You pay it. A tariff is functionally a sales tax on your own citizens, but it's laundered through the border, so it looks like you're punishing a foreign country.
But the whole argument, the stated goal, is that this makes me not want to buy the Indian phone, right? It makes me want to buy the American-made phone instead.
That's the theory. That's called protectionism. If the foreign product becomes artificially expensive, you'll choose to buy the local product instead. You protect the local industry from foreign competition.
And that sounds, it sounds logical, on paper at least. Buy American, protect jobs. It's a powerful slogan.
It's very logical in a vacuum. And it's important to say tariffs aren't inherently evil. They're a tool, like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a beautiful house, or you can use it to smash your thumb. It all depends on how you use it.
And the sources actually bring up a really interesting example of good tariffs, or at least effective tariffs, South Korea.
Yes, the South Korean rice market in the 1980s and 90s. This is a fascinating case study that every economics student should learn.
Break that down for us, because usually the story we hear is just free trade good, tariffs bad. But this seems a lot more nuanced.
It's very nuanced. So picture South Korea in the 80s. Their economy is growing, but their agricultural sector is way behind. The farmers were mostly using old traditional methods. They didn't have modern technology, and their yields were low. It was a very inefficient industry.
And meanwhile, you have the U.S., Thailand, Vietnam, these agricultural powerhouses producing massive amounts of high-quality rice very, very cheaply.
Exactly. So if South Korea had just opened the doors and said, free trade for everyone, what would have happened?
Their local farmers would have been wiped out.
Instantly. A flood of cheap rice would have hit the market. Every Korean farmer would have gone bankrupt overnight. It would have created a massive social disaster with millions of people suddenly unemployed.
So the government put up a wall.
A massive wall. They implemented a quota system, and any imports above that tiny quota were hit with tariffs of over 500%.
500%. That's not a tax. That's a do not enter sign with flashing lights.
It was a prohibition, effectively. But, and this is the absolute critical part, they didn't just put up the wall and walk away. That's the mistake so many countries make.
What did they do?
They used that period of protection to aggressively invest in their own farmers. They used that time to modernize the industry. They subsidized new machinery. They funded research into better crop yields. They educated the workforce on modern techniques.
It was like putting a patient in a cast. You immobilize the limb so it can heal and get stronger.
That's a great analogy. Or training wheels on a bike. You put the training wheels on so the kid doesn't crash and get discouraged. But the goal is always to eventually take them off.
And they did?
They did. Once the Korean farmers became more competitive, more efficient, the government could gradually lower the tariffs. That is a surgical, strategic use of tariffs to build an industry.
Okay, so South Korea used a scalpel. What we saw in April 2025. Was that a scalpel?
No. That was a sledgehammer swung by someone who was blindfolded in a room full of priceless Ming vases.
Let's talk about that sledgehammer. Because the main event wasn't rice. It was the showdown between the United States and China. The timeline here is just breathless. It's like watching a car crash in fast forward.
It really was. Usually trade disputes take months, sometimes years. There are statements we're thinking about raising rates, then a summit, then a working group, then a comment period. This was instantaneous.
So walk us through the TikTok.
Okay, so April 2nd. Trump announces the tariffs. For China specifically, he slaps on a 34% tariff on a huge list of goods.
Which is high, but maybe not world-ending high at that point.
It's extremely aggressive. And in international relations, if you hit me, I have to hit you back to show my own people I'm strong. It's a political necessity.
So China responds.
2 days later, April 4th, China retaliates. They announce a matching 34% tariff on key U.S. goods. A very carefully selected list.
Standard tit for tat. You tax our electronics, we tax your soybeans.
Right. This is where a normal negotiation would begin. But this is where Trump's psychology comes into play. He didn't see this as a negotiation. He saw it as an insult. He saw their retaliation as disobedience.
And he issued that ultimatum. The text of it is wild. I have it here.
Yeah.
Remove by tomorrow 12. Or we put 50% tariff on above that. Not 12 o'clock, just 12.
Remove by tomorrow 12. It sounds like a loan shark collecting a debt. It doesn't sound like diplomacy between two nuclear superpowers. There's no room for discussion, no off-ramp.
In China, what was their reaction?
Well, what could they do? China is a sovereign nation. They have their own domestic politics. The leadership in Beijing cannot be seen by their own population as bowing down to a 24-hour deadline from a foreign leader. It's politically impossible. So they refused.
So April 9th comes around, the deadline passes.
And the U.S. adds the 50%. Now, keep in mind, tariffs stack. They compound, and with some existing tariffs already in place from his first term, the math gets ugly fast. But China immediately, and I mean within hours, responds with their own additional 50% tariff.
It was an immediate escalation, no hesitation.
None. They were clearly prepared for it. And the sources mention a number here that made my jaw drop when I first read it. They say the cumulative effect of these compounding tariffs brought the effective tariff rate to roughly 1,125%. Yes,
Yep.
1,125% on both sides.
What does trade even look like at 1,125%? Does it just slow down?
It looks like nothing. It stops. It ceases to exist. You cannot trade. If a $10 widget now costs you an extra $112.50 just across the border, you don't buy it. The supply chain isn't just disrupted, it's severed instantly.
It's a full-blown embargo. We effectively embargoed the second largest economy on Earth in the span of 1 week.
And they embargoed us back. And that is why the markets crashed. It wasn't just, oh, prices are going up a bit. It was the sudden, horrifying realization that the two biggest engines of the global economy had just disconnected the drive shaft while going 80 miles an hour.
And the most terrifying part of this whole sequence, no meetings, no calls, no diplomats.
None. The sources highlight this breakdown of diplomacy. Trump's philosophy, as stated, was tough love. He seemed to genuinely believe that if he just hit them hard enough, they would crumble and come to the table and admit they were ripping the U.S. off.
But they didn't crumble, they just hit back harder.
Exactly. It was a fundamental misreading of the other side.
Okay, so that's the tit for tat. But we need to look under the hood at the how. Because when I read about the Trump formula for calculating these tariffs for all the other countries, I honestly thought it was a joke. I thought it was satire from The Onion.
It does sound like something from a sketch comedy show, but it was, for a week, official U.S. policy.
So help me understand this. I'm looking at the formula in the notes. The way they decided how much to tax a country was based on the trade deficit.
That's right. The formula was this. Take the total U.S. trade deficit with a specific country and divide it by the total imports from that same country. That gives you a percentage.
Okay, I want to try this. I need to see this in action. Let's apply this to, I don't know, my local grocery store.
Okay, let's do it.
So I go to my local store. I spend, let's say, $500 a month on groceries. So my imports are $500.
Okay. And how much does that grocery store buy from you?
Zero, unless they start buying my used podcast scripts. So I have a trade deficit with my grocery store of $500.
Right. So now apply the formula. Take your deficit, which is $500, and divide it by your total imports, which is also $500.
That's one.
Wang.
100%. So according to the Trump formula, because you buy food from them and they don't buy anything from you, that implies that your grocery store is secretly charging you a 100% tariff.
But that's insane. They aren't charging me a tariff. I'm just buying food because I'm hungry.
Exactly. You have just, in 30 seconds, identified the fundamental, catastrophic flaw that every economist on the planet was screaming about. A trade deficit doesn't mean the other country is charging you anything. It just means your consumers prefer their goods or they produce them more cheaply.
So he takes this completely made-up number, this 100% in my example, and he says, this is what they're secretly doing to us. Yes. The claim was that this calculation revealed the hidden tariff that other countries were using against the U.S. And then, in a twist of what he called kindness, he announced he would only charge them half of that calculated percentage.
I'm being nice. I'm only going to punch you in the face half as hard as I incorrectly imagine you're punching me.
Yeah.
It's surreal.
And the result was this list of tariff rates for different countries that felt completely random and arbitrary.
Let's go through the list. Cambodia, 49%.
Absolutely devastating for a small, developing economy that relies on garment exports.
Vietnam, 46%. Taiwan, 32%. India, 26%. The entire European Union, 20%. Israel, one of our closest allies, 17%.
These numbers are astronomical. In the modern world, countries will go to the WTO and fight for years over a tariff of 2% or 3%. A 49% tariff on Cambodia basically deletes their primary export market overnight.
It's economic carpet bombing based on a math error. But, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the math error isn't even the most absurd part of the story. The worst part is the penguins.
The penguin incident, a classic.
Please, for the love of all that is holy, explain the penguin incident. I need to hear it out loud.
So, as the administration rolled out the list of countries receiving tariffs, on the list, receiving a 10% tariff, there was an entry for Heard Island and McDonald Islands.
Okay, I've vaguely heard of them.
Right. Now, these are real places. They are external territories of Australia. They are located in the subantarctic, about a 2-week boat ride from any kind of civilization.
So who lives there? What is the bustling industry of Heard Island that was such a threat to American jobs?
Nobody lives there.
Nobody.
0 humans. The only residents are several species of penguins, seals, and seabirds. The last time a human expedition stayed there for any length of time was apparently over 10 years ago.
So we declared a trade war on penguins.
Effectively, yes. We place a 10% tax on the goods exported by penguins.
Why? I mean, how does this happen? Was it a typo?
The prevailing theory, and really the only one that makes any kind of logical sense, is that whoever was drawing up this list saw the name McDonald Islands.
Oh, no.
And they assumed. McDonald's. Maybe it's a theme park, a corporate tax haven, a commercial hub.
They thought it was a McDonald's Disneyland near Antarctica.
It seems likely. They saw a familiar commercial name. They assumed it was a place where money was being made and that the U.S. must have a deficit with it, and so they taxed it.
It's funny. I mean, the image of a penguin trying to fill out a customs form to pay a tariff is objectively funny.
Yeah.
But the laughter kind of dies in your throat when you think about the implications.
It stops being funny very, very quickly when you realize what it signifies. It proves there was no vetting. There was no Council of Economic Advisors running models on this. There wasn't even a basic Google search.
Right. If they didn't take 5 seconds to check if people lived on this island, did they check to see where our critical semiconductors come from before slapping a 32% tariff on Taiwan?
Exactly. Or where the components for our medical devices come from before hitting the EU with 20%. The penguins are the canary in the coal mine. It showed the entire world that this policy was likely drafted on the back of a napkin, probably in an afternoon, with 0 understanding of the real-world consequences.
And while the White House was busy taxing imaginary McDonald's islands, the rest of the world was getting ready to fight back, and their retaliation wasn't random. This was strategic retaliation.
This is where the story shifts from, potential incompetence to outright economic warfare. Because foreign governments, they aren't dumb. They know exactly how the American political system works.
So looking at the source material here, China went after U.S. corn farmers and car makers.
Right. Iowa, Michigan.
Canada went after poultry farms and AC manufacturers. Europe targeted steel mills and slaughterhouses.
Do you notice a pattern?
They're not luxury goods. They seem like heartland industries, the kinds of places that employ a lot of people.
They are swing state industries. This is 3D chess. The European Union didn't just pick random American products. They pulled up the U.S. electoral map.
They looked at the purple states.
They did. They asked, where can we inflict the most political pain on this president? So why put a tariff on American-made cranberries? Because Wisconsin is a critical swing state. Why target bourbon? To squeeze Mitch McConnell and Republicans in Kentucky? Why Harley-Davidson motorcycles? To hit union workers in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
That is absolutely ruthless.
It's standard procedure in a modern trade war. You don't try to hurt the American economy in general. That's too diffuse. You try to make the phone lines ring in specific senators and representatives' offices. You want the steelworker in Pennsylvania calling his rep and screaming, my overtime just got cut, fix this.
But it's political jujitsu. You're using his own voters against him to apply pressure.
And it works. Pain creates political pressure like nothing else.
But the pain wasn't just coming from this smart targeted foreign retaliation. It was coming from inside the house. And this is where we need to talk about the Mr. Beast economy.
This was my favorite example from all the readings because it makes the complexity of modern supply chains so relatable.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTuber in the world, has a very successful chocolate company, Feastables.
Right. And he sent out a tweet during this crisis that went viral. He pointed out a fundamental reality of modern manufacturing. He proudly makes his chocolate bars in America, made in the USA.
Which is exactly what Trump says he wants.
It is, ideally. But to make a chocolate bar, you need a key ingredient, cocoa beans. Can you grow cocoa beans commercially in the continental United States?
No, I don't think so. The climate's all wrong. You get them from West Africa or South America.
Right. So that raw material must be imported. Now, Trump's plan slaps a massive tariff on those imported cocoa beans from, say, Ghana. Suddenly, the core ingredient cost for making that chocolate bar in America skyrockets.
And Mr. Beast's point was, what exactly?
He said it would actually become cheaper to move the entire factory out of the US than to continue making the chocolate here.
Wait, explain that logic. How does that make sense?
Well, if you build your factory in Canada or Mexico, you can import the African cocoa beans there without paying the crazy US tariff. You make the chocolate bar cheaply. Then you can either import the finished bar back into the US, which might have its own tariff, but could still be cheaper, or you just sell it to the rest of the world from your new Canadian factory.
So the tariffs, which was designed to protect and encourage American manufacturing, actually created a direct financial incentive to leave America.
Exactly. It penalized domestic production that relied on global supply chains. And this applies to everything. Ford, GM, Tesla. They all talk about being American companies, but they use thousands of imported parts. They're called intermediate goods.
Intermediate good, the stuff you use to make the stuff.
Right. The screws, the microchips from Taiwan, the glass from Europe, the rubber from Southeast Asia. If you tax all the parts, you make the final product, the car, so expensive to build in America that it can't compete with a car built elsewhere.
And it also completely destroys the idea of just-in-time delivery, right? Which is how all modern manufacturing works.
Oh, absolutely. Feastables doesn't have a year's worth of cocoa beans sitting in a giant, expensive warehouse. That's dead money. They operate on a system where the beans arrive on Tuesday to be turned into chocolate bars on Wednesday that ship out on Thursday.
And if those beans are stuck in customs for 3 weeks because agents are trying to figure out if the 50% tariff applies or the 20% tariff applies,
The factory stops, not next month, today. The assembly line shuts down. That is a supply shock. And that is why the market panicked so hard. It wasn't just about future prices. It was the realization that the actual gears of the global machine were grinding to a halt in real time.
you know, it feels like we're watching a rerun, though. I mean, any history buffs listening must be screaming at their radios right now. We have done this before.
We have. And the results were, well, they were not great. The source material points to 2 specific ghosts from history that were haunting the White House in April 2025.
Let's summon them. First up, the year is 1890. The name is William McKinley.
The Napoleon of protectionism. President Trump has actually cited him as a hero in the past. In 1890, then Congressman McKinley passed a bill that raised tariffs to nearly 50% on a huge range of imported goods.
And the logic was the same. Protect American industry, protect American jobs.
The exact same logic. And the result. The Panic of 1893. One of the worst depressions in American history up to that point. Unemployment hit 25% in some areas. It was an absolute economic disaster.
Okay, so strike one. Then we have the big one, the one everyone learns about in high school history class, but then promptly forgets the lesson of. 1930, Smoot-Hawley.
The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. This is the textbook definition of unintended consequences. It's the ultimate cautionary tale.
So set the scene for us. It's 1929, the U.S. stock market crashes, the Great Depression begins, the economy is in a tailspin.
Right. So the economy is hurting badly. President Herbert Hoover thinks we need to save American jobs. So he signs this act that raises tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods to record levels.
He thought he was building a protective wall to keep jobs inside the country.
Instead, he built a dam that stopped the flow of global trade entirely. Other countries immediately retaliated, just like China and Europe did in 2025. Between 1929 and 1934, global trade dropped by 66%.
66%.
2/3 of all international commerce simply vanished from the face of the earth.
And that took a bad situation, the Depression, and made it Infinitely worse.
Much, much worse. Many economists argue it turned what might have been a severe but normal recession into the Great Depression. But the consequences weren't just economic, they were geopolitical.
Connect the dots for us. How do we get from tariffs on farm equipment to the Second World War?
When trade stops, economies collapse. When economies collapse, people get desperate. They lose their jobs, their savings, their sense of dignity. And desperate people listen to radical leaders who promise to fix everything by blaming outsiders or other countries.
The rise of extremism?
Exactly. The economic devastation of the 1930s directly fueled the rise of fascism in Italy and Germany and militarism in Japan. Japan, specifically, felt cut off from the global supply of resources like oil and rubber, which gave their military the justification they needed to invade their neighbors to seize those resources by force.
So trade wars can become real wars.
If goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. That's the old saying. And that is why, for the last 80 years, since the end of World War II, the United States has led the world in doing the exact opposite.
We built the system. We created the World Trade Organization, the WTO.
We spent 80 years and trillions of dollars building and policing a system based on the idea of free trade. We told the world, lower your tariffs, trade with us, let's bind our economies together so tightly that we become too profitable to ever fight each other again.
And Trump's move in April 2025 was essentially taking a sledgehammer to the foundation of that very system.
It was a complete rejection of the entire post-World War II global order. It was the U.S., the architect of the system, saying, we don't believe in this anymore.
Which brings us to the whiplash, the U-turn. Because just as the world was bracing for this long, drawn-out economic depression, just as the Prime Minister of Singapore was giving speeches warning about the parallels to the 1930s, it stopped. Or at least it paused.
The April 9th reversal, it was one of the strangest moments of the entire week.
Take us through that night. What happened?
It was late in the evening on April 9th. The markets had just closed after another brutal day. The chaos had been building for a full week. Then suddenly, a statement from the White House. Trump announces he is pausing the tariffs for 90 days to allow for negotiations.
And he changes the rates.
Yes, this is the weird part. He lowers the proposed tariffs to a blanket 10% for everyone, except China. China's tariffs were actually increased and locked in. The wording was also very strange. The direct quote was something like, I do 90 days for the people, did retaliated China. The messaging was chaotic.
But the immediate threat, the 1,125% apocalypse with China and the 49% tariff on Cambodia, that was put on hold.
Correct. The immediate global panic was dialed back from 11 to about a 6.
So why? Why start a massive fire and then pour a bucket of water on it 3 days later?
This is where the sources and the experts diverge. There are 3 main theories floating around, and they are all plausible in their own way.
Okay, let's break them down. Theory number 1, the oops.
This is the incompetence theory. Basically, he didn't expect the backlash to be so severe or so fast. He thought he could announce tariffs, look tough for his base, and the stock market would stay high because, investors love him.
But investors love money more than they love any politician.
A lot more. And when trillions of dollars started vanishing, when CEOs and his own major donor started screaming, he panicked. He realized he had stepped on a landmine and tried to hastily backpedal. And given the penguin incident, this theory has a lot of weight. It suggests they just didn't think any of it through.
Okay, that's theory 1. Theory 2, the Grand Master.
This is the 4D chess theory. The idea here is that it was all a brilliant, calculated setup to isolate China.
How did that work?
Think about it. First, he threatens everyone. Europe, India, Canada, Japan, our closest allies. He scares them to death with the prospect of economic ruin.
Right.
Then, just as they're about to unify against him, he pulls back the threat for everyone except China.
So Europe and India and the others are just so relieved to not be destroyed that they don't complain about the remaining China tariffs.
Right. They breathe a massive sigh of relief and quietly step back from the fight. Now, China is the only one left standing out in the cold, facing the full force of U.S. tariffs. He successfully isolated his main rival by feinting at everyone else first.
It's incredibly Machiavellian, is true.
It is, but it's also an extremely high-risk strategy that could have easily backfired.
And then there's theory 3.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is by far the darkest.
The market manipulation theory.
This is where we have to look at the timing of the tweets. The timing is deeply suspicious.
Suspicious is putting it very, very mildly.
So on the morning of April 9th, the day he paused the tariffs, but hours before the public knew he was going to pause them, what did he tweet?
While the market was still in free fall, he tweeted that it was a great time to invest.
While everyone else on Earth is selling and panicking, the president is saying, buy now.
Yes. He tells his followers to buy into the dip. Then, hours later, after the market closes, he releases the good news, the pause, which he knew was coming all along.
And the next morning, the market opens and it spikes. A massive rally.
It skyrockets. One of the biggest single-day gains in years. So anyone who bought when he said buy, knowing or being told that good news was coming, made an absolute fortune instantly.
That's a classic pump and dump, or a crash and pump in this case.
It looks like textbook market manipulation. He controls the policy that moves the entire global market. Step 1, crash the market with terrible news. Step 2, tell your friends to buy stocks on the cheap. Step 3, release good news to spike the price. Step 4, profit.
If the CEO of Apple or any public company did that, they would be in prison for a very long time.
In a heartbeat. The SEC would be knocking down their door before lunch, but this is the President of the United States. And as the expert source material notes, finding a prosecutor or a judge willing to charge a sitting president with stock market manipulation, it's practically unheard of. It's incredibly difficult to prove intent.
It's the ultimate form of insider trading. You're the ultimate insider. You are literally making the news that moves the market.
So was it incompetence, brilliant strategy, or pure greed? We may never know for sure, but the result is the same. The global economy was treated like a poker chip in a very high-stakes game.
And that leaves us with the hangover, the global hangover.
Yeah.
Because even though he paused most of it, you can't unring that bell.
No, trust is the most valuable currency in international economics. It's worth more than the dollar or the euro, and that trust is broken, maybe permanently.
Businesses can't plan for the future.
Exactly. If you're the CEO of a major company, do you build a new factory in America today? You don't know if the tariffs will come roaring back in 90 days. You don't know if the rules will change again because of a late-night tweet. So what do? You sit on your cash. You wait. You don't hire. You don't build.
And the whole economy stagnates.
And geopolitically, that warning from the Prime Minister of Singapore is the one that keeps me up at night.
Remind us one more time what he said.
He compared the situation explicitly to the 1930s. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, the last time the world experienced a breakdown of trade roles on this scale, trade wars escalated into armed conflict and eventually the Second World War.
He's saying the quiet part out loud, that this isn't just about economics.
He is identifying a fundamental shift from a world of rules to a world of power. In a rules-based order, a small but wealthy country like Singapore can trade fairly with a giant like the US because both agree to follow the same rule book. In a power-based order, might makes right. The strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must.
That is a terrifying thought. It's not just about the price of iPhones or chocolate bars anymore. It's about whether the world order that has kept the peace for 80 years is fundamentally breaking down.
It raises the final, unsettling question. Are we watching a chaotic but ultimately effective negotiation strategy? Or are we watching the active dismantling of the global economy in real time?
That is the question. And I don't think we have the answer yet. I don't think anyone does.
We don't. We're living inside the pages of the history book right now, and nobody knows how the chapter ends.
Well, on that cheerful note, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Next time you're at the store, just pick up a random product, any product, a t-shirt, a can of soup, a power tool. Look at the label. But don't just look at made in China or made in Vietnam. Think about the journey. Think about the cotton from Egypt, the cocoa beans from Ghana, the lithium from Chile, the microchips from Taiwan. Think about the invisible web of ships and trucks and people that connects you right here to a farmer or a factory worker on the other side of the world.
It's a web that holds us all together, for better or worse.
And for 1 week last April, we learned just how fragile that web is. And we learned that someone is running around that web with a very large pair of scissors.
Stay curious, stay critical.
Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.